Thank you, Kavya, for the introduction and welcome to this topic on global mobility and discrimination at the workplace. Thank you also for the audience for attending. I know you have a choice of three different panels, so thank you for attending and giving me and our fantastic panel members here the opportunity to share our thoughts with you on this topic. We have a limited time, and in this, what I like to say is we want to dot the three I's. The session should be informative, firstly, it must be interesting, and it must be interactive. The first two are our problem, and the last one, I would like the audience to participate, ask questions, give your thoughts, give your experiences, and let's make this an interactive and enjoyable session. One final word before we start. Uh, all my three panelists are from the industry, and there's no other legal person, no other law firm on the panel, so I'll have to speak a little more than I normally do when moderating, so you have to tolerate that. Okay, so let's get started. What is global mobility, or what is workforce mobility? Now, before COVID, one always had the idea that this is, you send people for a few months to another office, to another country, to another department. It means the physical uprooting of someone here, there, go for some experiences. Now, one thing COVID has taught us is that it's possible to work from anywhere equally efficiently. And I think that's one of the few good things about COVID that's come out of COVID. So what is workforce? It's more like a workforce flexibility now rather than mobility. To me, this means the ability for anyone to work for anyone from anywhere. It's very good for employees now because they can take jobs with different companies. They don't have to uproot themselves. It's good for employers now because you can access talent from anywhere in the globe and you don't have to pay a lot of costs that you might otherwise have to do. So let's just get on to my first question to the panelists. And let me start with Divya, who's the only lady on our panel. Divya, you spearhead the legal and compliance of a truly Indian company, Datamatics, with a lot of subsidiaries and offices offshore. Do you have a flexible working policy, and what are the practical challenges you have faced?
Okay, thank you, Alif. So we are, as Alif has rightly pointed out, a true global company where more than 88% of our revenues are coming from overseas. And if we see the spread, and which comes out to be a true global in terms of compliances, the spread is majorly US, followed by then UK, Australia, Switzerland, Mauritius, Germany, Netherlands, Philippines, and Dubai. So, to manage the mobility within all these geographies, to combat the law, is coming out with different kind of challenges and different kind of nuances. So, do we have a very matured mobility policy? It's not with the name mobility, but there are various policies which govern the mobility aspect, and we do have it. We have it in terms of its implication in various geographies and in terms of its applicability. Is it very matured? I would say honestly not yet. It's in a grooming phase, and we are making changes into it, and we are coping with the changes. And I will, in the later on questions, I will give some illustrations and examples and the situations and circumstances that we have recently dealt with in this area.
Thanks very much, Divya. Bharat, moving on to you. I know Capgemini is been expanding your India presence with a number of acquisitions in different parts of India. You mentioned to me you had some practical issues on remote working, particularly from SEZ and customs bonding issues. Can you throw some light on that, and what is your policy on remote working?
So, I think first of all, post COVID, the entire employer employee engagement has changed. It's not the traditional, the way it used to be earlier. Mobility policy was existing even before, but the way it is being looked at now is drastically different. I mean, if you look at IT sector, I think most of them are currently in the hybrid model in some way, which is clearly indicating that there is a possibly resistance from the employee that to come 5 days or full time like pre-COVID days. Does it exist in other industry? Possibly yes, but since the IT industry, the employee base is quite high, it becomes more visible in the news all the time. Now, as I think Alif and Divya also pointed out, mobility is no longer about just moving from one city to another, or those kind of programs we had. Today you have people sitting anywhere, including their home possibly, and then providing services. I think the challenge for companies will be manifold in terms of the services companies like us, where you are having clients' data, the governance, the security, and how do you ensure that the same governance and security is there when somebody is trying to work from home. Second challenge is the productivity or the efficiency or the deliverables which are coming out from anyone. And it's not necessarily only tech, it applies to even lawyers, it applies to even enabling functions, or it applies to anyone who works from home. My personal take is that the productivity was quite high in probably 2020 and 2021. It has nosedived in 22. Why? Because people have started now becoming more focused towards social engagement, etc. So, mobility and other things, answer is yes. Now, coming to the specifics about, say, SEZ compliance or the issues around tax, etc. Remember, it's not only about the employment policies. IT sector had SEZ norms also to comply with, which in turn meant that 100% of employees should be in office. During COVID, they allowed work from home. Because why this is related? Because all the equipments that companies procure, there are custom exemptions. Why? Because it is meant for export purposes and blah blah blah. So they wanted exports to be documented and implemented through your locations or SEZ location, and that's how the compliance used to be done. In COVID era, it became a challenge. Post COVID, if you remember, the ministry had issued guidelines saying for SEZ, 100% of attendance needs to be there, which again was tweaked at some point of time. So there is a struggle still, Alif, with the SEZ compliances. We need to figure out a right balance of what employees expecting versus what regulators are expecting, and how we try to balance it out. I think there are manifold angles. It's not only about employer-employee relationship that one needs to go through. And of course, we can dwell into specific examples probably in the subsequent points. But the idea was it's holistic view that one has to look at it when you are doing this hybrid model also.
So, if I can add on to
Of course.
what Bharat said, previous experience of the associates gaming system. So we had certain policies already put in place. Having said this, some of the policies could have been seen as draconian. Like, okay, I don't have network, and you're saying that you didn't complete your work. So it became pretty difficult. Then comes a custom duty. We had this, like what Bharat said, the bonded equipment. So most of the SEZs where we operate out we get duty exemptions. So all these employees, when they moved off, we had to provide them this equipments which had to be shipped to them. Now you are actually sending bonded equipments to these employees. Then the government comes and says, "Oh, that's okay, country working from home, but these are bonded equipments. We have to get exceptions." But now The government also wants us to come back to the SEZ. Then initially they said the 100%, then they said 50%, because there's no way you can't put a gun on somebody's head and say, oh, get back to office. People are not comfortable. Even now it's a 50% rule is there. Having said this, there are political reasons. There are reasons saying that if you don't have employees coming back to office, you don't have infrastructure development happening. So there are a lot of challenges in doing this. Having said this, we also should understand that the world has changed in the last 2 years. You can't have this complete office work, but to Bharat's point, the productivity went up and came down. The employees also need to understand that it's a two-way street. You can't have getting money and not doing the work is also the things. So I'm just talking about the challenge. It's not easy for companies to work in this environment unless we need to work together with the employees. The employee need to understand. But at this point of time, the most important thing is to get people to understand the culture of the company. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, the employees of the mobility thing and remote working has given an impression that, I don't need to be aligned with the culture of the company. I don't need to collaborate as much as required. I am an SME, I need to do only this much. That would be a problem for career development also, development of the company, the individual development. So these are the challenges. Sorry, I'm jumping into your sphere also.
Your company had nothing to do with COVID. I think without Amazon, we would not have survived COVID.
Yeah, that's my friend sitting there.
Yes. We really need to be thankful to get our deliveries, our supplies, everything. Amazon did a phenomenal job. You also mentioned when we were talking about moonlighting, and you said that's a concern that you have. Could you just tell us a little bit on how you deal with that?
So this is a point which, in fact, there was an earlier discussion a few months back in Bangalore where the question of moonlighting came up. So actually, Bangalore is the place from where some company took action against, I won't name the company, but company took action against employees who were, I won't say it's moonlighting, it was dual employment. So I would like to first, put this point in the table. That is, moonlighting is different, dual employment is different. So, a lot of people saying that the company didn't do the right thing by terminating somebody who was doing that. I had a different opinion. Look, that's dual employment. Does your contract allow you to do that? So first of all, most of our contracts, most of the multinationals and even the Indian multinationals have exclusivity embedded in their contract, so exclusive service. So if you have that, that means you are actually not paying an employee, especially when I'm talking employee, I'm not talking at the associate level, beyond that also, that there's enough salary paid to them. And they are providing exclusive service to you and you're paying for that. Once you have them on your roll, them doing another employment is a little bit of a challenge. Now coming to moonlighting. So what is moonlighting? So the word, moonlighting is after the sunset is over, you go do something during that time. In fact, it's something like, making a rack in the evening or something like that. I would put it that way. So some moonlighting will be, I would look at it as more of a hobby or an extra work done beyond your normal work. Could be two things. One is for self-development, to support some fringe groups. Third, fringe, social support or something. And the third is a hobby, like I go for singing in the pub or bar in the evening, I make money. I'm a photographer on Saturdays, Sundays. The company has not bought me over, right? I can do some few things on my own. That I would look at moonlighting. But dual employment, it's a big question now. Yeah.
That you need to protect more by contract.
Yeah.
The law in India does not prevent dual.
I would just want to add briefly about one of the incidents which has landed our table. Can you believe the extent of moonlighting that people are doing in IT sector? One person in our company was found to have 27 PF accounts. And in the names of his relatives, his wife, his mother, his father, and the type of compromise that it could have done on your own IPR, on your product knowledge, is like devastating. And when we have investigated deep into it, we found that this is not the only person. There are many other person, and we are not talking about dual employment. We are talking about compromise with your own processes, your norms, your IPR, your policies, your knowledge, your training that you are giving is all getting replicated, because at the end of the day, how difficult it will be if there is a there is a breach of IPR. It's all in the mind. Okay, he could have taken the name of his wife and he could have done the same coding, and we would have compromised with our own product system. So I feel it has to be reviewed more holistically and seen how it can compromise with it. And I'm not joking, it's 27 PF account number. It has gone to a very different level, and we have dealt with it.
I think that person needs to be awarded, because because if you're not being able to catch him on performance, that means the high performer, 27 jobs at the same time. Okay, but
in a day,
Yeah.
so I don't know how much time he gave to each person. But I mean, I'm reminded of a comment that a client made to me many years ago, which actually inspired me to start the employment practice in our firm in about 2010-11, when I visited the office inauguration of a software development center. And it was state-of-the-art offices with the latest equipments, a gym, a cafeteria, the latest coffee machines, you name it, it was there. And I told the client that you have spent a lot of money on these assets. And she looked at me, and I'll say it in her own words. And she said, you know, Alif, you are in the service industry. These are not our assets, what you see around. These are objects. Our assets are the employees. The people who work for us are our assets. And every evening they walk out of the door, and I have no guarantee that they'll come back the next day. And if I have 150 software engineers, if they suddenly decide to go somewhere else, I'm totally screwed. So I have to do everything in my power to take care of them. This is just one thing I can do to help them feel motivated to want to come back to work and give their best. So of course, I mean, there are a lot of good things. I mean, you have to take care of your employees, but you also have to look at some practical issues when you frame these policies, which are employee friendly or motivation factors. It's not only remote working. People say, I want to work from home, I want to work from hometown, or I want to work from home country. And these can lead to a lot of issues. I mean, take a simple case of a domestic case where a person is in Bangalore, he has a nice house, families, children in school, offered a job in Bombay. Now, some years ago, he would hesitate because he has to uproot his family, he has to live in a matchbox flat. But now he's offered remote working. It's great. But there can be issues. For example, take a simple issue. Which Shops and Establishments Act applies to the employee? Does he get holidays as per the Maharashtra rules or the Karnataka rules? Is his working hours governed by Maharashtra or Karnataka? These are issues that do arise, and people have to take care of them. Does the Mumbai company have to register under the Karnataka Shops and Establishments Act? What happens when it's cross-border? It's even more complicated. I mean, we have many NRIs working in the US. We all know that. Software companies in the Valley. And many of our clients have come to us saying that our NRI employees want to work from India for 3 months, 6 months. They are very well, they are productive. They want to spend time with their aging parents. They have property issues to take care of. We don't see an impact on productivity. Is it okay? Sure, it's okay, but I mean, you could see a lot of issues. Which law will govern the employment? Is it US law or Indian law? What happens if there's an accident? What about data privacy laws? Which law will apply? What about things like if you want to terminate him? I mean, that's a live case we had. We had to terminate somebody who was working remotely from India, and a company was worried that they'll claim protection under Indian labor laws. And whereas in the US, you can give a pink slip and get rid of him, it's an at will employment. So we had to advise the company to call him back to the US and then terminate him. What about non-tax issues? Where does the employee pay tax on the salary? Does he have to pay some tax in India? Does the US company need to withhold tax? Should we limit the number of days? Is there a taxable presence risk? Is there a FEMA violation? What if he wants the salary to be paid in the US bank account, but he's living in India for 6 months? Is there some GST issues? Many companies now say India has good talent, we'll employ people in India through a manpower supply company. Is that allowed under FEMA? Is there GST? Does the US company need to register as a foreign company in India? All these issues will arise in global mobility. Now, I can't give you answers to all this in this few minutes that we have, but what I want to do is flag these issues so that when you all frame your policies, all this is taken into account and proper advice is taken. Now I come back to Bharat. I mean, you mentioned the productivity went up in the first 2 years and people were at home, and now it's come down. And you've seen all the practical issues, legal and practical issues that we've discussed. Do you think it's still an employee motivator, or do you think that it's high time people come back to office now like the good old days?
See, it's never a rule for everyone. Huh?
Correct.
Even in this room, if you ask what you prefer, you will have a mixed reaction possibly. Maybe skewed in one over the other possibly. But so it's very difficult to have one single rule. Currently, we are in hybrid. But having said so, I think there are still challenges with respect to data. How secure is the data when you're at home? Okay, that's something which is very critical for, it's not only about us, it's for even client data. Now, when your client is in a highly regulated industry, say in BFSI segment, then it becomes more imperative that you insist that the employees are back in office. Why? Because you are having more regulations and more compliance to do, and there are additional protocols which needs to be followed. So industry specific norms also makes a difference. So depending on the client you are servicing, that also has an impact on how you take a decision with respect to employee. I think my reading is corporates will have to accept that 100% work from office is not going to be there in the near future. Maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I don't know. And whether it ever happens or no, I don't know. There is a flip side, or the other side of looking at it is, even for corporates, there has been savings in infrastructure, right? The real estate and the other infrastructure which probably you are, and again, depending on the size and scale, your responses could be different. But infrastructure cost saving also has helped some way in for corporates, where many of their employees are actually working from home. So to me, I think in the near future, this hybrid is going to continue. But with the exception that there are certain engagements, certain business segments or sectors to whom you do services, you will insist that you should be working from office. Now, when you say hybrid, I just want to take two more points here. One is, I was pre-COVID, I was in Mumbai, but post-COVID, possibly I want to go back to where my hometown or where I belong to. And if I have an office there, I should be allowed to work from that office. So that one shift which has happened, which was earlier also, mobility program was there, but employees were not necessarily opting for it because their project teams were all together and blah, blah, blah. But today, if I can go back to my home city and if my company has an office, I think employer and employee both will have to be open in some way to open and manage that. Unless, as I said, sometimes some project contingency demands that you need to be in one place at one time. So that's one change which has happened. Second is about your base location versus your home location where you don't have an office. Now the companies will have to think through as to what kind of roles that you can open up proactively, of saying, okay, these are the roles, I don't have a problem if somebody works from home. In fact, you might have seen that many corporates have actually started using this as a recruitment tool also, saying this role is open for work from home, and many are opting for this, even compromising on compensation. No? Why? Because they are working from their hometown, which is not necessarily metro cities. And I think third, and this is more specific to IT, I would say, if you look at the concentration of IT offices are mostly in metro tier 1 or possibly in tier 2 also, whereas the employees came from tier 3 or tier 4 cities also, in terms of from whether for education or even subsequent employment. Now if they have to go back to tier 3 tier 4, which is happening now, again the issue will be what kind of roles you want to be shifted there. Now when you talk about cross border, I think the bigger issue is about the tax. Now it's a tax for company and the tax for individual also, because individual tax bracket also may change. And this is a little bit more trickier one. So many companies have come out with the policy that, okay, if you go abroad, you can work for Indian company, but only for a certain number of days and not beyond that. And of course, depending on where you are registered and which country you are in, you can figure out those number of days, what it could be. Beyond that, you are not allowed to work from overseas country, unless the next option is to transfer that person. Then it's a different ball game altogether. You have to resign and then move to another one. So tax component is becoming another challenge. And third, which I'll come back, I think there is a need for regulations also to look at it in a way where the working models are going to be different.
Agree with you, Bharat. And
Just one point I want to add, Alif,
Yeah.
sorry, before you go. Gig workers, the new category which is going to come up, which is there, of course, in the code, I believe, but it is still not implemented. Now imagine if they want to work through their own assets and not necessarily your asset. You are just giving them the access, and they could be wherever they are. You need that skill set, you need that knowledge, you need that SME expertise for a certain period of time. What kind of network you're going to enable that to happen is something which probably companies will also have to gear up in the future.
Bharat, on a lighter vein, it reminded me when you said in the initial years of COVID, the husband and wife were feeding each other and very happy. What we found is, in the first few months of COVID, there was a baby boom. And in the next few months of COVID, our family law practice zoomed because there was a divorce rate. Because husbands and wife got tired of each other and wanted to go back to office. Divya, you mentioned you had some interesting experiences on your cross-border mobility. If you could share something with us.
So, very recently, one of a female employee, it's as recent as almost 3.5 months back, one of the female employee requested that the husband got transferred to the UK, and she also, because we do have office in UK, and she wants to work from UK. The problem with us was she was a key critical resource, and we don't want to lose her. The second is she has been with our organization for quite a while, and we don't want to demotivate her or come as a not so good accommodative employer. We said, okay, we are going to consider it. And then after a lot of other challenges that we had to deal with, getting the visa done and getting through the immigration issues and other issues, her salary became one of the biggest challenges. Here she was drawing salary in the INR, and then the salary was to be in GBP. And when we offered her the salary, it became a huge bottleneck in terms of what she was doing a comparison with the UK counterpart. And here, with after uh, overcoming all these issues, when we had sent her to the UK, she is not satisfied with the salary. We are not satisfied because the requirement of that job role could have been easily done in India with half the amount that she is currently drawing from the UK, and the requirement was more of a physical presence. So both the ways it was a jammed situation. Were we an accommodating employer? The answer is yes. Were we happy? The answer is no. And was she happy? The answer is no. This is one of the challenges, and I can give many examples.
Slide, which was a case study, which a very similar case we had from another client, where the lady asked for a transfer to Amsterdam because her husband was posted there. It's not a transfer, the company didn't have an office there like you have an office in the UK. So she wanted to work from home from the Netherlands. And we were asked to advise whether this is possible or not possible. Now the manager of the employee, the management wanted to retain her and wanted to accede to the request because she was a good critical member of the team and they didn't want to lose her. On the other hand, HR was not happy about this because they said if we allow it, this will set a precedent, and then future requests, how do we deal with it? And we don't want to create payroll hassles and a lot of other issues. Not to mention all the tax issues we've discussed and everything else. So the company asked us, do you have any legal inputs on it? And one of the first things we said is, you please ask the lawyers in Netherlands whether she can actually do this, because what kind of visa is she going on? Is she going on a spouse visa? Can she legitimately do work where she generates income in the Netherlands? So we don't know what happened, but 2 weeks later they came back and said, thank you for that, we've taken advice, not possible, we've rejected the request. So these kind of things do happen, and one has to deal with it. Manoj, any final comments on workforce mobility? Otherwise, we'll move to the next topic on discrimination.
No, I'll add on what Bharat said. One is, we have to be innovative. The world has changed after COVID. The hybrid model is something which we are all living with. We should also look at each company's appetite to have so many number of people work from home and so many on a regular basis. Let's talk about people at a certain level or requirement for the company to have them come to office. Let's talk about an associate population. Do you need the associate population to come to office regularly? Each company will have to make their own mind on how they want to do it. Look, I will look at it this way: like your most important talent or your best of team should, in my opinion, should be looking at coming back to office. Because without having them in office, I'm sure if you have virtual support all through, probably your productivity could be maintained at a certain level if you have a nice rewards, recognition, and whatever it is. But end of the day, if you want to if you want to go for the long haul, you need to instill the corporate culture, the company's culture into all those people for your long haul employees. So you will have to bring them back to office. Bring them back might be 3 days, making 4, making 5, back to the old days. But for the rest, where you don't need them to coming to office, the associate population, who's your BAU kind of people, you could think whether they could continue working from their homes. You could have tiering systems. Like now, when we spoke about the tier 1 cities, the salaries are high, the cost of living is high, you could look at tier 2 and 3 cities. This could also make it advantageous for employees to work from their small hometowns where the cost of living is low. They can still perform as long as they perform. Second is, network. Now the government has also got a big role to play. The government has to ensure that you have the network, you have the support, and the S&D registration requirement. Like, let's say we got 28 or 29 states. Last known as 29, if I'm not wrong, unless they decided to change one more. So we have 29 states. You need 29 S&D registrations if you need to operate across a country. Now, does it make sense? Look, I know companies who go and just pick up an WeWorks office or one of those office space of 100 square feet just to get an S&D registration. The government needs to look at all this. Then you could also look at independent contributors in different parts of the country working on. But again, data privacy is again a big issue, or your protection of data. So I would say each company needs to look at it, innovate, bring new employment models to help both the people and the company reduce cost as well as increase productivity in this. On the mobility piece, this is something which is a question like, should I be the best employer, provide all the facilities? I want to go to Dubai, my husband is in Dubai, my wife is in Singapore. If the company has, like what you said, you got presence there. Does it make sense for the employee to be working there for an Indian entity? Now, in what you said, the work is all for an Indian entity, but you need to pay the UK salary because you have the laws of UK which will apply where there is a minimum wages or whatever you call it. So, can your company afford to pay that? That's a question.
Yeah. So in this kind of situation, the view has to be more holistic because you don't want to lose that resource, and that resource has contributed for a long time. So it has to be like a win-win for both. But at the end of it, how far did we succeed is a big question mark.
Thank you. I think tax and employment go hand in hand, and that's what we found in our practice. And we do have a tax practice as well, which complements it very well. Let me move on to the next topic on discrimination at the workplace. We have about, I think, 10 minutes for that. Discrimination today has gone much beyond gender discrimination. It's a huge host of things that can lead to discrimination at the workplace. The fundamentals of discrimination are in our constitution, articles 14 and 15, which says that the state shall not deny any person equality before the law. And article 15 says discrimination against any citizens on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth are not allowed. Now, discrimination, the article 15 talks about 5 types of discrimination. There could be many more types of discrimination that's in current age that's happening. Anyone in the audience want to have a view on like what kind of discriminations do people face today at the workplace or otherwise? No? Well, we face discrimination issues on things like the color of your skin or your political views. There's a lot of discrimination as to which political party you support. Where you stay, I mean, people who stay in certain areas are looked down upon. Where you studied, I mean, you've seen, many of you may have seen this TV serial Suits, where they used to recruit only from Harvard Law School and nowhere else. Is that discrimination? Are you pregnant? Are you able to work? Do you have school-going children? Can you give enough attention to your work? These are lots of discrimination issues. Recently, I attended an employment law session in Singapore, where we had the head of the US Equal Opportunities Commission give a speech, and it was very enlightening to know what he said, because he gets discrimination complaints from employees. And he said the single biggest discrimination ground of complaints is disability. It's not sex, gender, of the usual things, religion, but it is disability. People with disabilities are tended to be more discriminated against than others. And disability could be anything. It could be vision, it could be walking, it could be stammering, it could be Asperger's, it could be anything. And I think this is something which is very dear to my heart, because I have a vision problem, and I know I was discriminated against in school, where I was even denied a scholarship because the organization said, how will I manage abroad with low vision? So, I mean, these are things that happened, and they are subtle and you don't really realize it many times. Now, there are a lot of laws that we have on anti-discrimination. And a recent case in the Allahabad High Court where the court restored, the promotion to a police officer was denied because he was HIV positive. And this was challenged in the Allahabad High Court. And the court said that just because he's HIV positive, at the moment he is fully fit to do all his duties, and you cannot withhold promotion on that basis. Recent news articles, there are reports that a discrimination case has been filed against TCS in the US. And US employees are saying that TCS prefers Asians and Indians when it comes to providing job opportunities and promotions. We don't know how that will go, but US is a different cup of tea anyway. So let me go back to the panel, and let's see if if you have any anti-discrimination policies in your organization, Manoj.
Yeah. So we are pretty strong on this part. Look, you won't be surprised if you'll be surprised if recently somebody from US called me and said, "What is this caste?" I said, caste is something like, in India we have different castes. So they're not able to fathom that there's something like this here. There has been a caste discrimination complaint given by an Indian employee in US against another Indian manager in US. So he says now the number of complaints coming on caste discrimination has increased in US. So we have reached Chandrayaan, but we are all over the place on this. So discrimination of any kind is not tolerated in our organization. We have a very strong policy on that. We have investigation mechanism. There's something called Workplace Issue Committee, which actually takes care of the POSH also, that Prevention of Sexual Harassment Workplace Issue. And the same yardstick is applied to any complaint which is given by anybody against an employee of Amazon. So that means it is not just an employee to employee. It could be a customer to an employee. It could be a vendor's employee to an employee, plus a vendor also, or even a general public. So who's got a business interaction with us. So a very strong this thing, and zero tolerance to discrimination. Having said this, if I can add, we Indians, we find different ways to discriminate also. Yeah. So you can say color, class, creed, like you have the Luthians and non-Luthians. I'm just saying, please, the Delhi people, please don't take it that way. I'm just saying, we have all this. So one of the most important thing we should, what I would feel is, one is to have a clear message, give a clear message to everybody that we have a policy, you do this, what is action which we take? Our code of conduct and our action based on complaints should be consonant with our policies. So, and we should also ensure that the action taken should be consistent across all levels. So we should not be hierarchical when it comes to the actions taken. This is my view, and that's how we do manage our anti-discrimination policy as such.
I actually want to add few very interesting matters which has again been managed recently. So we hired a American citizen in the US, and at the time of interview she appeared to be like extremely a good resource for the area which we were looking for. And when we interviewed her on many aspects, she came out to be very good. After that, she just took advantage of all the facilities that our American subsidiary is giving in terms of not coming to the office, taking excuse of work from home, and after every 2 or 3 days she would take leave, either because the son is not well or the husband is not in town, and we find that the work is not getting completed at all as per the KRAs. We said like this is not the way it should be worked, and if this continues then we will have to put you into the performance improvement plan, and we'll have to ultimately, if it's not achieved, then we'll have to part ways. And here what happens? Is she files a case for discrimination. And what discrimination? That we being an Indian employer, having a based out of India, being a parent entity, we are discriminating and are more biased towards the Indian employees. And it's going to take a long way in terms of, the US litigations and all. Time will tell how we are going to prove ourselves. This is one matter. Another matter of discrimination which we have faced in our Philippines entity. So basically in Philippines there are a lot of LGBT staff, and and we are quite heavy in terms of employees there. 29 to 30% are belonging to that category, and we need to take care of all the sensitivities and cultural issues. And here, the biggest challenge that we are facing is again the performance versus the allegations of discrimination. When you are not getting up to the mark in terms of performance, then off late the complaints are coming that employees are taking recourse either to the differential, which is not the case because the policies and everything is strong, and they want to hide behind the garb of discrimination. So these are the practical challenges that currently on the point of discrimination. But being a multinational organization based out of India and various other countries, we do have a very robust equal employment, diversity and inclusion policy which covers very strong process and nuances on the discrimination.
But it cuts both ways. In fact, let me tell you this also. It is not that discrimination is not there. No, as an employer, I can very well say no, we are good. But there are a lot of discrimination
which is happening. Yes, you're right. I think we have to wrap up quickly. So I'll just say the last slide is the various discrimination laws that India has in place. Some of them are part of different statutes. Some of them are standalone statutes. Some we are all aware of, like the equal remuneration, and the maternity benefits and the POSH. But there are certain acts like the Right to Person with Disabilities, the Transgender Protection Rights Act, the HIV Act, where many people are not so aware of, and employers need to be aware of these rules. And the Disabilities Act even says that every organization has to frame an equal opportunities policy. So these are some things that people are really sometimes not aware of. And some of these laws do apply only to government employees, but I'm pretty sure that they will be extended to private sector soon. So I think this is our last slide. Bharat, do you want to say some closing remarks?
Just one point I wanted to add.
Yes.
Having a policy and framework is one thing, but remember, when you want to resolve this unconscious bias, you will have to have awareness and the behavior culture related sessions with your team. That's very critical because people, what they see is what they're going to believe, not the policy or the code. So that's very critical.
I agree with you entirely. There has to be a culture shift, a mindset shift, which is happening slowly but surely. It is happening. Any questions from the audience? I think we have asked to wrap up quickly. So any questions from anyone? We have a minute or two. Great. So thank you to the panel for giving your insights. It's been very, very useful. I hope everyone found the session to be interesting, and thank you.